Hello and welcome. My name is Brian McAvoy.
And I'm Tim Shank. This is Two Cyborgs and a Microphone. Cyborg, check.
Cyborg, check. Microphone, check.
Our topic today is posthuman rights.
Human rights may have to extend further than ever when we begin connecting our brains to computers.
We're talking today about a paper by Marcelo Ienca and Roberto Andorno. My apologies if I butchered your names. It was published in March of 2017, entitled Towards New Human Rights in the Age of Neuroscience and Neurotechnology.
I think you pronounced that part correctly. The paper addresses 4 new rights, which are going to become important when our analog brains start speaking digitally.
This poses some new challenges. Let me read off the 4 rights. We have cognitive liberty, which is the right to alter one's mental states with the neurotools as well as refuse to do so. We also have mental privacy, which is basically around snoopings, brain snoopings, who can see what and when. And there's mental integrity. I kind of think of it as mind hacking. What changes are we going to allow our devices and software to make to our brains? And then there's psychological continuity, kind of along the lines of personality modification. Why don't we kind of break each one of these down?
Let's start with cognitive liberty. That's the right to alter one's mental state with neurotools.
I think we can classify there's all kinds of neurotools. Let's as an example, there are TDCS devices. There's devices that change the way your brain works. There's magnetic resonance devices. There's all kinds of different devices that actually change what your mental state is. So we have ways to make ourselves sleepy. We have ways to make ourselves alert. We have ways to make ourselves think differently. So I think that's where that's coming from.
As science learns more about how the brain works and what we can do with it, this is just becoming a breeding ground for hackers and body hackers, because we are getting to the point where we can develop tools and little devices on our own in our garages. I've built the TDCS units myself, and those are the kind of thinking cap devices. They're very simple. They're very easy to build, but do it properly.
And I always think of, because one thing I've used a lot is binaural beats, which is now there's a new, more effective version of binaural beats where we're using technology through sound waves to change the way our brain works. And you can use that to put yourself into study mode, for instance, or make yourself relaxed, make yourself sleep. So there's a lot of other tools, and now that we're directly accessing the brain, I mean, even TDCS, I think you can use for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Now, things like art have been changing our moods and feelings at any given time forever, since we became Homo sapiens sapiens. But as you pointed out, these things directly affect our brains with things like electricity or sound waves that we wouldn't have stumbled upon otherwise without having researched the brain.
Yeah, and with art, there's always the option to look away. I mean, you choose to expose yourself to the art. Now, when you're wearing headphones and using devices all the time, what options for choice are there?
Mm-hmm.
When you're plugged into all these devices that we have, and we're starting to use these more and more, we lose the ability to really make that choice because it's kind of part of us nowadays.
Well, I think art has always been very obvious. You go into an art gallery, whereas something like let's say a device that might be reading your emotions, if you wear it all the time, like when you're watching television, so that you get a better experience from the television, maybe louder sounds at certain times or jump scares that actually scare you, how do you know what it's doing during the commercials? You don't necessarily. No,
you don't. And in our practice, I mean, the practice of marketing, there are already, I noted it at one point, but I can't find the note. I think it's called neuromarketing or neuroscientific marketing, something like that they are actually testing and experimenting with different sound waves, different color patterns, different visual patterns to see how they affect our psyche. And they're using these in commercials right now.
Oh, definitely.
But with the TV,
they've been using those for decades.
With the TV, you can always look away. With the TV, you can always turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And in this new age that we're kind of approaching, we may not be able to turn that off as easily, at least.
Yeah. And I think that's why that the law, or the proposed law, cognitive liberty, is going to be so important, because we've always had the ability to turn it off. And what if we have a tool that the off switch isn't so obvious? So the next one we have is mental privacy. And this is kind of brain snooping. Who can see what's going on in your mind? If I want to open up my mind and say, hey, television, I want you to give me the full experience of this movie. I want you to tug at my heartstrings and scare the crap out of me. But I don't want Target to know when I'm in a shopping mood.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if a movie really if TV really gets to this point, because that's a one-way. I mean, that's a signal being sent into your home.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like an interactive kind of thing. So maybe a better example would be gaming.
That is a good example. Or even with all of the smart home, the voice control stuff, we have devices listening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Amazon would love to know when you're hungry. So someday...
Hint, Amazon, it's all the time.
Yeah. Someday Amazon's going to have some kind of device or application or something that reads your mental state somehow. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. They're listening all the time. They want to be in your life so that they can present those things right when you want them.
Yeah, AI is going to be predictive and say, oh, you haven't had pizza in a while, and there's a new pizza place, and it's just going to pop up and say, hey, new pizza place down the block. You want to try it? Yes or no? And you say yes, charges your card, and a pizza with your favorite toppings is delivered.
Right. So what is too much? Where do we draw that line? I mean, I think that's where what the question is here and what the writers of this paper are bringing up. Is as this technology becomes more and more entrenched and pervasive in our lives, where are these lines going to be drawn? Because that's an important question, because we have invited technology in deeper than any other method of advertisement that's ever been out there. Technology is in our homes, it's in our pockets all the time, and it's always listening.
Oh, for sure. And if you think Google is just a site that you go to every once in a while, think again. If you think Facebook is there for your sake, think again.
How many times has Echo just been like, I don't think I know that answer to that question, when you didn't ask it anything? We have it in like 4 or 5, we have it in several rooms. It's listening when we haven't said anything, when there's not even anybody in the room to say the keyword. But every so often, we'll just hear Echo in the other room saying, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. So it's listening.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing that sounds like the keyword.
Sorry, I don't know that.
Perfect timing. But I did use the word.
Good job, Alexa.
So I mean, sometimes you just wonder, why is it still listening? Nobody's in the room. There's nobody speaking in the house, but it's still listening.
Well, it would cost extra to have a proximity sensor. So...
Right. So there's this trade-off. I mean, how much privacy are we willing to give up? Obviously, I'm willing to let microphones from one of the biggest conglomerate companies there is into my house listening all the time, because here we have it. You just heard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But where does that line? I mean, when we start letting these things even deeper, where is that line?
Well, we get into the subject of books like 1984, where you don't have a choice. There is a TV and camera in nearly every room in your house, covering nearly every corner. Right now, we're kind of selling that right. Actually, we're paying for it.
So let me ask you a question, Brian. If Amazon offered a product that could listen to your brain and give you answers just on the fly. So if you wondered about something, you would have an answer piped into some input, your ears or something, something. Would you do that?
Depends on the cost. If I just had a magic answer box that gave me answers whenever I wanted them, I'd assume that there are advertisers out there who are being given my information, and in which case I'm the product. If it was something I paid a monthly service for and it was tightly battened down and nobody, and I mean nobody, got a hold of that, then I don't know. I don't know if it'd be somewhere in the middle, but I would like to keep it private.
I think that's the issue is you can't assume privacy anymore. That Google, Amazon, Facebook, Chrome browser, even Internet Explorer, you got you got Siri,
Explorer.
you got, I don't know, but some people do. You got Siri, you got Cortana. They're all there listening.
Google Home.
All the time. And yeah, Google Home. And these devices are just becoming more and more pervasive. So as we start to interface directly with the brain, there's no reason to assume that there won't be efforts, at least efforts made to listen into your brain, justified by convenience or functionality or something like that. That Google's like, oh yeah, well, we can listen to your brain every once in a while. It's just to help you find your search results. Come on. But that's the way they work. There's no reason that we can assume that they're not going to continue the same pattern of behavior and development as they have been.
I think it's a matter of when. I think as soon as they can, they will.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to be surprised by that.
See, I started, and I go back and forth. I have a very private, home network and things like that. There's a lot of stuff I've done towards anonymity on the web and things like that. And I go back and forth between trying to reclaim or establish anonymity and then saying, well, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows everything. Privacy is a myth. And I just it ebbs and flows for me.
I get it. It's kind of like going to the bathroom. Sometimes you're like, hey, everyone, what's up? And then you just want to sneak away to a private room and not have anyone bother you.
I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that. But okay, I'll take your word for that, Brian. But yeah, I don't know. And for me, it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of just my position at the time. Sometimes I'm conscious of how much data is just leaking out from my life, and other times I'm always conscious of it. Sometimes I don't care. Sometimes it bothers me, and other times I'm struggling to reclaim that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good to know how to get off the grid.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, Brian, I got to say. We're getting kind of off topic here, I guess, but
well, let's flip to the other side, which is the third proposed law, which is mental integrity or protection against mind hacking. So mental privacy has to do with keeping your thoughts to yourself. Mental integrity has to do with somebody else putting thoughts into your mind.
So what would be justifiable use of that technology? Because I know it exists out there already. So what would somebody be able to say, hey, Brian, we can do this for you, and that would be okay?
I would say something like training. If somebody could program me to play the piano or the guitar, that'd be really cool. But if somebody programmed me to be an assassin Manchurian candidate, that wouldn't be so cool.
So more for personal improvement. So if you would say it's okay for a device or a software or something like that to modify your brainwaves and your mind. What about PTSD? What about a service that makes makes you okay with something that you're not okay with?
Yeah, that's got some serious health benefits.
Absolutely. And they're doing that. I've seen articles that they're doing this in the lab, that they can change your memories so that those impactful negative experiences that are degrading your life don't have that impact anymore.
I'm pretty sure the Geneva Convention says something about brainwashing. I'm not sure where it is, but I'm pretty sure it does. At least I hope so.
I think brainwashing has a pretty fuzzy definition. I think we're all kind of in that definition already. I mean, we're being manipulated at so many different levels all the time.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That happens through our advertising. That happens through social training. As a kid, I think that most of elementary school and junior high, that's social training. You're learning hierarchies. You're learning how to answer to authority. You're learning how to obey. You're learning how to be in a group of peers that have little to no power except for to interact with each other, but have that to me is brainwashing. I mean,
I think that's socializing, which, like you said, brainwashing has kind of a fuzzy definition. But this is what society has deemed as, right and proper and eating with the correct fork at dinner. And then I think you start into getting some weirdness where I would think mind hacking would be causing you to act outside of what you believe to be proper and what you've grown up learning.
Well, and that kind of goes into the not necessarily what you believe to be proper, but say a situation with PTSD. Somebody has an experience in a wartime in wartime that they can't release. Sees some kind of horrors or has some kind of experience that they can't release, and it makes them, say, antisocial and things like that. It's not necessarily what they believe to be right. It's what they're comfortable with. And ridding yourself of that experience does have value in that context. But that same technology could be abused in other ways.
I agree that it could definitely be abused.
Yeah, if you can start taking people's memories or rewriting people's memories, which you can do now with the right equipment and a willing participant. That's one thing that's important to understand. You have to be a willing participant for most of this stuff, any of this stuff to work.
Yeah, well, except the mind washing. There are 4 lights.
So there's viable uses for this. I mean, really things that really improve people's life, but the same tools that are used for that can be used for other things.
Right. Well, it's a tool, and tools can be used to help or hurt.
Yeah. Psychological continuity is the next one on the list here, and the final one. So that is personality modification. To change who we are is something that we exclusively reserve to ourselves. Right? It's our right. It's my right to decide who I am.
Mm-hmm. If you want that PTSD treatment, you have to say, I want this.
And we're approaching a time when we can start to do these things at a distance. If our pattern in history continues, which there's every reason to expect it will, these devices will become more and more powerful and smaller. That's the way things move. And along those lines, all of the stuff that we're using to, like, say transcranial magnetic stimulation, that's similar to TTCS, but it actually, I don't think that even requires electrodes on the head. So as we develop that technology to refine that magnetic field, they can go in and actually change the way your brain works. There's a chance, if not a real expectation, that will be able to happen at a further and further distance with a smaller and smaller device.
I kind of see this from 2 sides, being used for good and ill. So let's say there's a riot and the police want to calm people down. They don't want to have to start firing tear gas and everything, but they have a technological device which can soothe everyone. It's probably going to be used well, I would hope. But then, if that's kind of turned up to 11, you get a Clockwork Orange. They're no longer themselves.
I mean, right now we use therapy, and we can require therapy for people who have significant enough mental issues that they end up doing harm. So if they can require therapy for those individuals, do you think that there's a chance that they can require other types of therapy?
I could see that sort of thing being used for, I don't want to say hopeless cases, but for people who would otherwise just be stuck in a cell. If they would say, hey, we have this therapy, it will take the edge off what makes you dangerous. Are you willing? Are you willing to be a part of this? If not, you get the standard sentence. If so, you make this choice to alter your psychological continuity.
Okay, and I agree with that if the choice is presented. But now let's take that to national security level, because we do things to people who threaten national security without anybody even knowing. Do you think that that's a potential?
A potential? Goodness, yes. I assume that's why it's being developed. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with it.
So I don't think we're going to come up with any real answers. I think the important thing is here to start talking about this now, because we're all going to be interfacing with computers deeper and deeper at a more and more pervasive level as time goes on. It's important to start thinking about this and to start discussing it, I think, and finding out where are these lines? What are the restrictions we put on the companies that provide these services, our governments, our authority structures? because at some point it's gonna creep into our lives. And to draw these lines while we still have our wits about us, before we've been dazzled by all the amazing things it can do, I think that's important.
I completely agree.
Well, I hope our listeners will give this some thought and actually discuss this. I mean, when you see a new device, when you see some new technology, something that can modify your brain waves, that can interface with your brain, that can read your brain, start thinking about and discussing, well, where is too far? Have I given consent on this? What level of consent do I need to give? And call it out. Call it out, discuss it.
And tell people about it.
Absolutely.
Tell us about it. Tell us in the comments.
Yeah, well, thanks for listening. All of our listeners are invited to email us at cyborgs@twocyborgs.com. You can also email either of us individually. That's tim@twocyborgs.com or brian@twocyborgs.com.
Come visit us at our webpage, twocyborgs.com. Check out our store and get one of those swanky hooded sweatshirts with a Two Cyborgs logo, or get a coffee cup. I've got one. It's one of those big jumbo ones, so I can fuel myself all morning. Support our podcast and stay warm, whether from the outside or the inside. This is Brian McAvoy.
And this is Tim Shank. You have been listening to Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Two Cyborgs.
Like, follow, share, +1, and don't forget to subscribe on any of the popular podcast services, including Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher. Help us move up the podcast ladder by subscribing and then commenting on iTunes. Tell us what you think about these new rights.
And also, we're now on Twitter. You can find us at Two Cyborgs. That's at the little @ Two Cyborgs.